I always like to go to the classrooms and talk to the students. And one of the questions I like to ask is, what do you want to be when you grow up? Children, when they give the answer when they're really young, they say whatever the vocation of their parents is. Because their parents when they're really young are their heroes. That and they don't know many other jobs other than what their parents do. But as those children get older, their choices that they say will often reflect the values that they have in their life. For instance, if they value adventure and excitement, they may say, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a jet fighter. Or if that idea of service is ingrained in them, then they may say, I want to be a nurse, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a firefighter. Oftentimes I hear sports star or actor. And I'm guessing today, if I ask that question, we may even get social media influencer in there now. When I was young and I was asked that question, I read a lot of books about mountain men and fur traders, but I knew that job no longer existed. So in my young mind, I thought, what would be similar to that? So when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I thought, I want to be a lumberjack in northern Wisconsin and live in the forests. Then as I got older, I realized that that's not really an occupation either anymore. So I decided on the more practical, I want to be a forest ranger. I actually thought of that all the way through high school. I took all the courses on environmentalism and all of those types of courses. One summer, I actually went to Minocqua in northern Wisconsin and worked for the whole summer in the woods for the DNR. I really took this seriously. When I had a chance, I would go into the woods. I spent 10 days canoeing in the boundary waters on the coast of Canada. I would go hiking any chance I could get. I had my life all planned. However, somewhere in college, I changed my question from what do I want to do to asking, what does God want me to do? What is God calling me to do in my life? As Christians, this should be how we choose our life. It's a different question. In fact, we should all be asking that question every day. There should be the daily question, God, what do you want me to do today? I hope that would be part of our morning prayer. But then we should also be asking that question for our whole life. God, what do you want me to do with my life? And ask that question especially if you are younger. Many young people, I've had this discussion with them, they're actually afraid to ask the question. What if God calls me to do something I don't want to do at this time? So today I would just like to take a look at two of those calls that some people might consider scary or intimidating. Because today is Priesthood Sunday. So being Priesthood Sunday, I thought that it would be a good thing to look at the sacrament of holy orders. You see, there are two sacraments of vocation. A vocation is call. That's what the word means. So there are two sacraments dealing with what is God calling me to do with my life? What is the purpose that God is giving me in my life? People will often ask young people, have you ever thought of being a priest? Now, what's odd is when they ask that question, they almost automatically say, in many cases, no, I've never thought about it. I think that's the wrong answer. Yeah, well, how can you say that that's the wrong answer? Well, if we are to listen to God's call in our life, we should actually explore all the options. And I believe every Catholic young male should ask God, do you want me to become a priest? Then in that dialogue with God, in that dialogue of prayer, God will call some men to be priests and others he will not. Therefore, when they ask the question, have you ever thought of this? Have you ever thought of being a priest? We should say, yes, I did think about it, because we should all think about it. I thought about it, I prayed about it, I asked about God about it, and at this time, I don't believe that's where he's calling me. Or the answer may be, yes, I'm still talking to him about it, I don't know yet, we're still praying. Or you might even say, yes, I've been praying about it, and I think this is where God is calling me. But how will we ever know if we don't ask? The next question would be, what is the sacrament of holy orders? First, it's a sacrament like all other sacraments. Just like every other sacrament, the sacrament of holy orders is a real encounter with Jesus Christ. And then through this encounter with Jesus Christ, Jesus gives grace to the person receiving the sacrament. Now, it is different from other sacraments in that not everyone receives this sacrament. Only certain people are called by God to be ordained, and then, even after that, only certain people are chosen by the church to get ordained. When a young man is ordained, he receives graces from God. Just like in baptism and confirmation, his soul will be changed. The man is then conformed to Christ in new and different ways. He takes up the actual roles of Christ, of priest, prophet, and king, in ways that that man can now, as a priest, guide the church and do the sacraments. He's actually given the power to say Mass, hear confessions, and the sacraments. We often refer to Mass, and this is one of its titles, as the wedding feast of the Lamb, where Christ is the groom and the church is the bride. If the priest is conformed to Christ to say Mass, this means that he becomes the groom in the wedding feast. He's conformed to Christ. In this sense, the priest is united to the bride, the church of Christ, in a similar way that the husband is united to his wife. Now, since most of you will never be ordained or receive the sacrament of holy orders, I would just like to end this section by asking you to pray for priests. Priests can only take up their role with your support and your prayers. But also pray that young men will listen to the call from God. Remember what Jesus said. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send his laborers into the harvest. Now, there is another sacrament of vocation. There is another call from God that we should pray about. This sacrament is also very intimidating when we actually think about what it is a call to. And that is the sacrament of marriage. I mentioned that young people often don't pray about being a priest. However, I also think that many young people don't ever ask God whether they should be married or not. If you ask people if they're planning on getting married, they just sort of have this automatic, yeah, I guess so. It seems to be an assumption. but it is actually a call from God, and they should ask if God is actually calling them to marriage in their life. You see, there are other options. They could be a nun, they could be a sister, they could be a monk. They could choose to be a single person serving God with their lives. There are lots of options. But marriage is a sacrament of vocation, and it's a call to a very specific role in life. We should pray and ask God, God, are you calling me to get married and raise a family? And if you hear that call to marriage, then I would encourage you, immediately begin to pray for your future spouse today. Even if you don't know who that future spouse is, pray for them that when you finally meet them, you will have a wonderful future together. Again, like all the other sacraments, the sacrament of marriage is a real encounter with Jesus Christ. And in this sacrament, both husband and wife are given very specific graces that they will need in this sacrament. They will need those graces because, you know what? It is very difficult to give your life totally away to another person, trusting them, if you don't have God's help. First, what is marriage? I want to quote from the Catechism so we have an exact definition of what our church teaches. It says, the matrimonial covenant, so it's a covenant, not just a contract, by which the man and woman establish between themselves a partnership for the whole of life. So they're coming together forever. By its nature is ordered towards the good of the spouses and then the procreation and education of offspring. Did you catch that definition? First, it's a covenant between two people, not just a contract. This isn't just a state contract, but it's a covenant. Contracts are an exchange of goods and services. A covenant is between people and is a creation of a family. And this covenant is for the good of the spouses. That's obvious. Wife and husband are to support and love each other no matter what their struggles. But then it gives the goal of marriage, the birth of children and their education. Did you catch it? The goal of the vocation of marriage is to create a family, to raise that family in faith. I always like to point out that education is so important. It's central to what those parents are doing. And that means educating them in the faith and helping them to know Christ. So as you are praying and asking God, God, are you calling me to marriage? You should also be asking, am I called to give my life to raise a family devoted to my children? Marriage is a wonderful sacrament, and it will fill you with many graces. Your home will become a school of love where you learn to forgive one another over and over again. Your home, your family will become a domestic church where mom and dad are the ministers and your children are your congregation where you care for their immortal souls. Yesterday, we had a 65th wedding anniversary. So you had the couple surrounded by all of their children, surrounded by all of their grandchildren, then all of their great-grandchildren. They took up a whole section of the church. And when I got to this point of describing the sacrament of marriage, I had this strong desire just to point and say, yeah, that's it. Look over there. That's what it's supposed to look like. When young people are asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would hope that they don't just think of what their jobs will be or what they're going to do to earn money. I hope that they would think, who do I want to be in Christ? What is my call from God? As Christians, to live our faith, it is essential to go to Mass and to receive the sacraments, because it is in the sacraments that we encounter Jesus and we receive grace. God has great plans for each one of you in your lives. He wants to give us the power to achieve those plans. So pray and ask God, what are you calling me to do with my life? And then when you receive the answer, live the life to which you are called and live it to the fullest.